Hello, welcome back to Coffee and Conversation with Dr. Wade. Today we're going to be talking with Dr. DeNeal, who is a community member here in Danville, a pastor, and so kind of brought him on the show to talk about some of the things they're doing in their organization and have a conversation that will circle back around to mental health. Dale or Dr. DeNeal?
Dale,
Dale, welcome. Welcome,
yeah.
Dale.
Yeah, thank you.
So just starting off, can you give us just a brief introduction to who you are?
Sure.
Where you're from?
Yeah. First of all, I apologize for my voice. I'm
Okay.
kind of getting over a little bit of stuff that's going around. So about me, I actually grew up in Vermilion County.
Okay.
I was born in Potomac, grew up there, went through high school there, and then went to college in Tennessee, Johnson University.
Okay.
And from there, my intent was to go into mission work. I was planning to serve internationally and actually did an internship in New Zealand.
Okay.
Spent some time there in New Zealand and thought that's where I was going to actually land after graduation. But I think God had different plans. Okay. And so my wife, who we dated in high school, she's from Rossville. I was from Potomac. Ironically, we met in Tennessee at kind of a conference.
Okay.
And found out we only lived 12 miles from each other.
Oh, so you guys didn't know each other?
We didn't know each other.
Oh.
Yeah, it was really
I guess
interesting.
the world isn't as small as you think.
That's right. And so we've been married 42 years. We have 3 grown children. 2 of my children are married. And I have 5 grandchildren, 7 years and younger.
Okay.
And I've served in different churches in Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
And Evansville, Indiana, and Lancaster, Ohio, which is outside of Columbus.
Okay.
And then in year 2000, I moved really back kind of home to this area. And from the invitation of Second Church of Christ, where I have served as executive pastor for 22 years now.
Now, what is an executive pastor?
So, executive.
You just literally
I did.
it just like dropped down.
My leg hit the lever down there. So, executive pastor, I oversee staff and operations, and in our particular case, strategic development for the church.
Okay.
Now, my undergrad degree is in theology. Okay. I did some graduate work in Louisville, Kentucky at Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, graduate work in theology. But I also have a master's degree in organizational leadership and a doctorate, a PhD in leadership studies.
Okay.
So I kind of oversee just the functional operations of the church.
How many pastors are at Second Church of Christ?
So
there's like layers, kind of like an organization.
So we've got ministry staff, pastoral staff, and we have about nine pastoral staff members, all kind of overseeing very specific areas of ministry, from children to junior high, high school. We have a pastor who oversees, for example, Celebrate Recovery program. And then we have 2 preaching pastors, because we have 2 different venues at our church. We have what we call our main auditorium, and we have Next Gen Auditorium, 5 services on Sunday morning. And we have 2 worship pastors, one for each of our venues. So, and then total about 20 people on staff.
That's a lot of pastors.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's a lot of pastors.
Yeah.
Lots going on there. Lots going on.
Yeah.
So I had the pleasure of first meeting, I guess informally, through the Global Summit when I first came on full time. I went and attended the Global Summit. First 2 years I was here. And then COVID hit, and I just was like, I am not going and doing a conference remotely. Like and so I did not return. And then this past year, returned and did made some coffee for you guys with the Connection Cafe.
Yeah.
So it was
fabulous.
Yeah,
it was a huge hit.
Yeah,
People
it was.
loved it.
I can't wait to bring it back next year. So that was I would say a formal, where I actually got to talk with people from, the organization. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting. Sometimes when we go to conferences, we tend to just talk to the people that we already know.
Sure. Yeah.
But it was nice to kind of interact with you guys on a kind of a different level.
Yeah.
And so kind of grew, just to know a little bit about you guys. One, I do want to hit on this idea of the Celebrate Recovery and what that is. Mm-hmm. But I really am interested in, well, let me backpedal just a little bit. So I was reviewing some of your work, and one of the things that stood out on the first page of your dissertation was 78% in 2007 people who participated in church. 78% identified as.
Yes.
By 2019, that had dropped about 13% to 65%.
Yes.
And go a few pages through pages. And there was a statement you had made, which I am going to cite you on that, by the way. Churches that affect cultural and societal change, they must grow, and they must have growth.
Yeah.
So when you think of this idea of a societal change influencing or affecting culture, is this kind of where some of your step up, like, is that one of the driving things of this kind of step up mentality? Can you talk a little bit about what you guys are doing that is outside of the traditional Sunday morning 5 service
Right.
5 service
Yeah.
meal?
Well, we believe that what's important about church shouldn't just happen on Sunday mornings and shouldn't just happen in the church. Yeah, we need to be in the community. I mean, that's what Jesus did. Jesus spent his time meeting the needs of the people that were in need. He said, I've come to seek and to save those who are lost, those who are hurting. He says, he said, people who are well don't need a physician, And he really came to minister to those who were poor, were marginalized. Okay. And that's really the mission of the church, to do the same thing.
Okay. Now, how long has Step Up been? So when was the first one? What is Step Up?
Sure.
So I don't know that everyone knows what. It's not an aerobic exercise. Okay. So
right.
What is Step Up?
So Step Up is a community organization. It brings every sector of our cities and our county together. Sectors: education, business, government, nonprofit organization, and churches, to address some of the what we believe is some of the key issues that our community faces. It started in 2017, and I have to give credit where credit is due, because this was really a dream of Deanna Witzel.
Okay.
Deanna had this passion to bring the community together and to talk about some of the challenges and issues that we face as a community. And it happened that we kind of dovetailed this with the Global Leadership Summit. In 2017, we shot a video. We went out and produced a video, interviewed city leaders, talk about what are the challenges in our community. First of all, we said, what's great about Danville and Vermilion County, because that also often gets overshadowed, Mm-hmm. But what are also our challenges? And so we showed this video at the Global Leadership Summit that year. We had over 500 in attendance that year. And we asked people to sign up. We had over 100 people sign up that wanted to be a part of it. In September of that year, just about a month later, after the Global Leadership Summit, we had our first meeting with about 90 people showed up. And we spent the morning just kind of a strategic development, kind of a strategic planning session, saying, okay, what are the things, we can't do everything, what should we do? And we identified three main areas that we need to focus on. The first was family and parenting. That was huge. That was a big issue. The next one was mental health, and the other one was substance abuse. And so since that happened, and by the way, we just celebrated our 5th anniversary of Step Up. And since that time, we have focused on those three areas of family and parenting, mental health, and substance abuse. And we do breakout groups. We all come together for an opening session. We'll do kind of community update, kind of highlight some things that are happening in the organizations or in the community. And then we break off into our groups, and we really do, what we're really about is networking, rallying, relating, and resourcing. Those are kind of our 3 R's of Step Up. Bringing people together, making people aware of what's happening, what are our resources, and how can we work together. So we're not siloed,
Yeah, I kind of think too is like, how do you, there's such a, I know I've attended a few times, and you have your parenting group, you have your substance abuse group, and you have your mental health group, and each one of those issues obviously needs due attention. But I think there is a lot of overlap between what's going on in the mental health world, what individuals are dealing with in regards to mental health, but also the underlying issues that kind of drive substance abuse. We don't tend to always think about some of the what we don't see, what the individual has experienced, and so it's really interesting. One of the things what I found interesting is I am not a churchgoer, and one of the things that I found interesting was that there was kind of this, you had your church, you had the church, but you also had entities outside of the church that were not religious-based organizations.
Correct. Yes.
That were just human service agencies, stakeholders in the community that were also, and so I didn't get the feel like, okay, this is like a conversion.
Not at all.
I was like, okay, so we have, we have state workers. I think there's been a legislator there, a variety of people from the community. And so I found that kind of interesting, as more importantly, just that it's kind of, a lot of my theoretical framework is, is the settlement house movement, and the belief that, we need to create these spaces for all kinds of people to come together, solve community problems, because really the community is the only one that can solve the problem. No one's going to come and fix our problems. I wish they would, but I just don't foresee that occurring. So it really is something that starts at the ground level.
I agree. You're 100% right. I mean, we've got to take responsibility for addressing the issues that are at our front door and our back door.
Okay. Has there been any measurable progress you guys have really seen, like things you've really kind of seen over the last 5 years where you're like, okay, this is kind of trending in the direction that we want it to be trending in?
Well, what we did early on was really kind of go after some low-hanging fruit. I mean, things that, kind of small things that we thought we could do. For example, just within the area of substance abuse, we had Jane McFadden, who is our coroner for the county. She made us aware of the fact that there's one of the huge issues in substance abuse is, how do we collect unused, where can people take unused medication from people that have died or passed away? Because some of those medications are really dangerous medications. And so we kind of identified that as an issue, and everybody got together and we created all of these locations around the county where people can actually go and drop off medications, from either expired medications or stuff that people, family members left after they passed away. And so they're located all around the county. We saw a significant increase of collection of that. The amount of of those kinds of medications being dropped off at those locations. I mean, that was just something small. We found some, we invested in some secure drop-off boxes that,
Okay.
that we put. And
Yeah, you would probably want those boxes to be secured.
we do. We do, for sure.
I mean, if people are stealing the
Yeah.
boxes, that would not be,
Yeah.
that would kind of undermine the process.
And so, so that was one little thing that we did. When there was the Vermilion County Health Department, mental health department especially, they got a grant for mental health first aid, especially focused on youth, and they were trying to get as many organizations to take advantage of this training that they were doing, and they had a goal of having like 2,000 people, training 2,000 people, and we saw what they were trying to do, and this is huge. And so as a Step Up group, we just got behind it, rallied it, pushed it, and had other organizations. Our church brought in the training for our whole staff, and so they actually met their goal by that year of getting over 2,000 people trained. And I think in part that was because of Step Up, and the communication, the network, the synergy that happened through that. That's really a great example of what Step Up is trying to do. Not necessarily trying to recreate something that's already existing, but how do we make something that's existing even better? How do we get behind it and fan the flame, and how to promote it?
Yeah, I kind of like when I was there. I kind of thought about some of the conversations I heard was where obviously some of the identifiers of things that aren't going well, but really I live a kind of I tend to try to stay as realistic as possible. It's like, what do I have control over? Where can I make the best of my time, and where can I be the most effective? And what are things that I have absolutely no control over whatsoever? And I kind of thought about things like what is in our power to work on, and like advocating for, I'm assuming you're talking about Jim Russell's
Yes.
training. And,
Absolutely,
hopefully Jim will be on here sometime in the near future. But the idea of just training individuals on mental health components, what to see, what to look for, what to recognize, moving away from this idea that people just need to stop doing what they're doing. That there is actually more going on than just poor decision making or people
Correct.
not doing the right thing. And I think that's kind of one of the reason I found this I found it fascinating was I know initially when I decided to do the coffee, I had talked to a colleague of mine who is also a member and I believe part of your organization,
Yes.
Terry.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, could I come out and fundraise and sell some coffee? And you guys all set that up, and that was awesome. And there was donations, and everyone really seemed to have a good time. What I found most, which really wanted to bring me back, was really just this idea. Like, I first thought everyone there was going to try to convert me. Like, that was like, I was like terrified. My wife was like, it's okay, you'll be fine. I'm like, it's in a church, and I'm just going to be like a captive audience. And like, and everyone was very open and kind of, I didn't feel an unwanted pressure to
Sure.
be a certain way, or and I really appreciated just kind of being able to fit in and be a part of it without actually having to be a part of it. So that, to me, I found very, very interesting. The other thing I found interesting is the shift that churches have not always done really well with mental health and substance abuse. They've tended to spend most of their time in a very specific method of solving that problem.
Sure.
And so one of the things is like, where did the idea of when did your church or did your staff or did you guys as an organization or as a group say, okay, the old way we're doing things obviously isn't working, and maybe these are some new things we should try? How did that kind of come about? How did you plugging into all these nonprofits
Yeah.
as a church, because it's almost like role reversal. So I know when I was doing working in the field, we would go to churches for resources like food, clothing, rent assistance. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't churches coming to our organization saying, "Hey, how can we help you advocate and promote and get people engaged in your services?"
Yeah.
And so to me, it was like it seemed like that was a switch, that you guys were taking much more of an active role in the community mental health world, much more than we're just going to sit out here until you need us. So was there a conscious decision to make changes, or was it just
I think it was
happen chance that it just worked out that way?
It was probably more evolutionary. I mean,
Okay.
because as a leadership, and and having been there for 22 years, I kind of saw this shift happen over time. It's easy for churches to become very inwardly focused, on what we're doing, and especially Second Church, because Second Church was a growing church. And so just trying to keep up with our growth and the people coming was a bit of a challenge. But our leadership team, many years ago, 2004, that's when we got involved in the Global Leadership Summit, which was based out of Chicago, out of Willow Creek Community Church. Okay. And, what was unique about the Global Leadership Summit was that it wasn't just about church leadership. It was about leadership in general. Okay. And so the various people who would come to the Global Leadership Summit, I mean, we're not church people per se. In fact, I remember very distinctly being up in Chicago, 2006, and Bono was there. And Bono spoke about the AIDS pandemic in Africa. He spoke about that. And he looked at the church leaders, and it was primarily church leaders there in that auditorium seat. The auditorium seats about 9,000 people. It was full. And he said, "Where's the church in addressing the AIDS pandemic in Africa?" I tell you, I was personally convicted by that. And it just so happened that our church sponsored a work in Ivory Coast, Africa, that had a medical clinic. It was one of the largest regional facilities that was treating HIV.
Okay.
And I decided to go check it out. And I went on a kind of a fact-finding trip in 2007 to Ivory Coast. I was really blown away. And I found out one of the greatest needs that they had there is dental care. We take that for granted, but there's a lot of significant physical health issues that occur because dental issues aren't addressed. And so I put together a dental team. At that time it was Dr. Khan, and we had a group of people. We had a doctor from OSF. Now, it wasn't OSF back then, but it was. She was an emergency room doctor. Anyway, so we went. We were there 2 weeks. We did dental clinic, and it just blew us away about the kind of help that we were providing. We started doing that every 3 years. Okay. And 2016, there was a young man that came. He had an incredibly infected tooth. I mean, his face was swollen out like this, and he'd go to the hospital, and they'd write him a prescription for antibiotics. Said, "We can't do anything with your tooth until we get that infection under control." And he didn't have any money to get the prescription or to get the antibiotic. And Dr. Khan looked at him and said, "If we don't treat this kid's going to die. He's that close from that infection just taking over his body." So he did the extraction. We had antibiotics with us. We got him on antibiotics, made him come back every day to get his antibiotic and to watch him. And by the end of those 2 weeks, that young man he was out of danger. He was making an obvious recovery from that. But that's the kind of thing that was probably very transformational in my own life about, how can we provide care for people that really are in need. And so that kind of ethos, I think, really developed in our church. We started then hosting the Global Leadership Summit at our church in 2015. We got an invitation from Danville Correctional Center the following year to host it there.
Nice.
And we started hosting it there. And then we had that 2016 was also the year we went back for another dental clinic in Ivory Coast. We hosted the GLS there in Abangaru, Ivory Coast, and have every year since. And so I think those things have played a part in us having a more external focus as a church. How can we become involved in the community? And how can we be the hands and feet of Christ, to people?
Well, I think, you keep coming back to this idea of leadership. And in years past when I was ambitious, and I guess I'm not really, I was fascinated with leadership styles. And I had eventually, at one point, I thought I was going to end up in a position where I was doing executive work, and all that was exciting. I'm glad that did not come true. There's not enough money in the world to be in charge. But I think too is there has been kind of this shift in, I at least know there's been a shift in companies over the last 10 years, and even now there is such a the workforce has changed so much over the last couple years, and I would even make an argument: has the workforce changed, or have people changed based off of what they've experienced over during this pandemic and so on and so forth? And it's like leadership has to evolve.
Yes,
like it really. What worked 10 years ago in motivating and enacting change may not work today.
True.
Because that carrot no longer has. I think there was even a leadership book, Sticks and Carrots, that talked about, that it's really not good
it's the incentives.
You have to really build intrinsic motivation in people through your leadership style, so that they will go out and actually do this stuff even when you're not around.
Yes.
And so I think the idea of, how does leadership evolve, and how does we take on different identities? So I primarily teach sociology, and so we usually link it down to 4 institutions. You got family, you got government, you got schools, and you got churches. Like, those are the 4 giant entities of the social world. And it's I find it kind of interesting that, schools have had to make changes over time. I'm assuming government has made changes over time. Families have changed over time. Has this kind of been more, in your experience, so you've been here 22 years, has this been like gradual change, or did you see like some big giant leaps of like, let's really reevaluate what we're doing and make some changes? Or was it just, for the last 20 years, just baby steps?
I think baby steps.
Okay.
I think it's been an evolution of a change. And really, I would say that creating a leadership culture in our church was a real key to that. The way our church is structured, we have elders who oversee our church. They're not staff. These are individuals who are looked at to being spiritually mature individuals. They come from a vast array of backgrounds: business, finance, or agriculture.
Okay.
We got farmers. But they all have strengths in leadership.
Okay.
And so developing that leadership culture in our church has been a real key to that. I would say that probably one of the fundamental leadership styles that have been key is, and we historically can kind of go back to the 70s with the emergence.
You can go back. I was not here in the 70s.
Of the transformational leadership kind of concept, which is still a very prevalent leadership typology that is studied. It's probably the most studied leadership style. But during that same time, out of that, there was this idea of servant leadership. And then probably one of my favorite leadership styles, which is a little bit of a merging of both transformational and servant leadership, is what Jim Collins discovered in his research, which my dissertation was really based a lot on his work. Jim Collins talked about the level 5 leader. A level 5 leader is someone who is personally a very humble person, but has a very strong commitment towards organizational success.
Okay.
There's not an ego involved. It's not about them trying to achieve some kind of egotistical kind of accomplishment of their own career success. Most of these level 5 leaders are just very personally humble, but very driven personally to make sure that the organizations are successful. And so I think that level 5 leader is the one that is making the biggest change in our culture. And a level 5 leader can be anybody. It can be a parent, it can be a professor, it can be a school teacher, a manager in an organization.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm very familiar with the servant leadership style, the transformation. I don't know much. I haven't read much of Collins' work, but now I'll have to do a reference on that. But one of the things I did a presentation a few weeks ago at a conference, and I said I think one of the things is I've never let my titles get in the way of my leadership, and that this idea that you can lead. You don't have to have. I mean, titles can take you a certain distance, and I really think that that servant leadership attitude, which is I'm going to serve other people, and I'm going to take care of. I'm going to model good behavior.
Yeah.
And in return, people will recognize what I'm doing or modeling or working for and helping, and they will start to adopt some of those things versus the do as I say, not as I do kind of approach. Because I even know as a young professional, it's like, wait, why do I mean, I always make the joke, when I was a young professional, I had to be at the meeting at 8, but my boss would show up at like 9.
Yeah.
And then talk to us about the importance of being on time.
Correct.
And I'm like, what you're saying is it's important for me to be on time, but not necessarily you to be on time. And that makes me not think that time is more of a status thing. Where you're at in the food chain it depicts whether or not you have to have good behavior. And then I had another manager who was always early. And that I was like, I got to get there because they're going to be there 15 minutes early. And so, and that really, I think, it wasn't that they said, well, want me to show up early because I want to do a good job. I want to be the first one at the meeting because I'm leading the meeting, kind of. And so it was really more of not so much, what titles they had or what positions they had, but it really came down to what behaviors they showed me.
Yes.
And I think, behaviors say a lot.
It does.
It says a lot about what you're trying to accomplish.
It doesn't say a lot, too, about character.
Yeah.
And I think what people are looking for today is authenticity. They want people who, they don't expect people to be perfect, but just to be authentic. And even when they blow it, they mess up, they say, man, I'm so sorry. Yeah. There's an apology there. There's I messed up. I mean, that's authentic. And I think people are drawn to that. They trust that more.
Yeah, and I would even say being genuine, being present. I know I had a colleague I worked with years ago, Dr. Tony. He was really into this gentle teaching model. He worked with a variety of individuals with a variety of different conditions and challenges, and he said, this idea of being gentle with people and being genuine and being present, not not just doing things like you can serve sandwiches to someone in need and never be there.
Yeah.
Here you go. Like, I mean, and
That's
and he
true.
would talk a lot
Yeah.
about it's not always sometimes how much you're doing, but it's the presence that you're having while you do it. And do people
Yeah.
feel that you're really there to make them or the situation better off? And I think that it's not just being authentic. I think being authentic is good, but being
Yeah.
genuinely present,
Yes.
being in the moment,
Yeah.
not like I got to check off my Christmas list of good deeds before the end of the year, but there is that genuine presence of I'm here to serve you, and I'm here to take care of you, and model good behavior. And so I think we've somehow, but that takes a lot. I think being present takes a lot to
Yeah.
really be. And he would always talk about that as like it's not just your body being present and he's like your words, your thinking, are all of these things showing that you are present.
Yes. Yeah, another way to put it, and it's a very old adage, but it's but it's true, and maybe just another version of this adage. But people people don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Yeah.
People when they feel like you genuinely care about me, you're present with me in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
You're interested in what's really going on in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna listen to what you have to say differently.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's again another part of the type of leadership that people are looking for today.
Yeah, I know when I was doing counseling, or when I was learning how to become a counselor or do counseling, somewhere along the line, either a professor or a colleague or said that the number one reason why people change is rapport. Do they have a relationship with you? And he said you can be a mediocre clinician and have great rapport and do very few interventions because they're going to adopt things that you and they are working on simply because you have a relationship with them, versus being the greatest clinician in the history of clinicians and not having relationships. It will not take you anywhere. So knowing, but people not trusting that what you know is in their best interest, I think is important. I think also too is in the shifts in culture and society. We don't want to take time to build relationships. I mean, it takes a lot of time to build a relationship.
Yeah.
That's genuine, authentic, and that's going to enrich our lives.
Exactly.
Like I can find people to go get food with.
Yeah.
Like or to share a cup, but like a truly enriching relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that even now, I think in one of the podcasts we were talking about, yesterday, we're trying to mechanically put people back together in these enriching relationships because we were so used to being away from each other. It's like just text me, or it's not like it's like we really do need to come together. And I was excited when I went to when I went and did the last event that everyone was coming out, and it was nice to see people taking snacks together and talking together and having lunch together and
At
the event, the Step Up event, the Global Summit event I was at.
Oh, okay. Sure.
And it was just nice to see people from different ages, professional backgrounds, life experiences. We're all in a common space, sharing time and experience. And and to me, I thought that's something I think that we have to get back to. And some of the things I'm doing with the Connection Cafe is all about bringing people together. I don't know if what I'm teaching is all that insightful.
Yeah.
But the real process is how do I get us back together and how do I get us to connect with one another? Yeah. Because through that connection, we're going to do good things. Something
that we do at Second Church, which is another program that started 2016. I mean, so this 2015, 2016, we just saw a lot of kind of things began to really emerge, from the church. And one of the programs we launched, which you just spoke at recently, was our Celebrate Recovery program.
Yes.
And talk about the importance of relationships. You know, this is helping people overcome their hurts, their hang-ups and habits. Oftentimes, you know, people have an addiction. There's a reason. There's you know, it's only symptomatic. Their addiction is symptomatic something else. Either that's because of a hang-up that's in their life that came from a hurt that came in their life, you know. And so we started that program in 2017, actually. Started that program, and I thought it was going to be something entirely different than it was. I thought it was just kind of a group of people coming together, kind of support group thing. And I would say that Celebrate Recovery has actually even changed the feel and dynamic of our church in a lot of ways, because I think we came to realize that that everybody has some hurt or hang up or habit in their life. Everybody. Rick Warren, who's a pastor, just a recently retired pastor from Saddleback Church in California, where this program started, he said there's two kinds of people in the world. There are people who need recovery and know it, and people who need recovery and don't know it.
Yeah.
And I would say that there's, even in our church, there's a lot of people that don't realize that, hey, they need recovery. I got involved in the program not thinking I needed recovery, and really found out that I did. Yeah. You know, there's, you know, issues in my life. And it created a much more greater grace place. I think we always felt like we were a church that was kind of a grace place, you know. Everybody's welcome, you know, full of life, room for you. And I think we realized that, you know, there's that we're very much in need of the same kind of connection, authentic relationships that you were mentioning just earlier, how important that is for people to come together. And I think that's the strength of Celebrate Recovery, is that, you know, people supporting one another and helping people walk through those difficult journeys in their life.
Yeah, there was, you know, so I've been familiar with, you know, from years of working in, you know, recovery services, you know, Celebrate Recovery, Transformations, AA, NA. You know, I know we were. I've grown to gain an appreciation. I don't know if I'm finally at that place where, like, my mom was like, someday you'll understand things, but I feel like I'm starting to. I've always been knowledgeable of things, but I really feel that I'm kind of getting to that place in my life where it's like I'm trying to understand things. And the one of my favorite quotes is, you know, a cynic knows the cost of everything and the value of nothing.
Oh,
I
like that.
It's like the idea of what, and when I started doing, you know, the Connection Cafe and doing these presentations, like, it was like, I really wanted, you know, nonprofits. I wanted mental health providers. I wanted individuals who were, you know, working through, I think recovery, Celebrate Recovery showed up. And the belief was that we need all of the entrees on the table.
Yeah.
And you can then decide what you need, versus this one fits all kind of mentality, especially in regards to recovery. And,
yes,
you know, there's been lots and lots of research that, you know, in not just, you know, addictions and mental illness, but heart disease, diabetes, you know, can be linked to past traumatic experiences. Like, you know, and so it's like all of these things, there is something that we all have to work through, either, you know, trauma, pain, loss, you know, whatever it is. And it's nice to know that, okay, that works for them, but I also have something that works for me. And being able to kind of appreciate the broad range of things that are out there. And so it really does kind of like, I'm like, okay, so yeah, I get it. I mean, I understand, and I think it's, and I could see the value in it. I can,
Yeah.
I mean, I could just see the value in it. And I think that we've kind of grown, I've kind of grown over the years to say, okay, you know, I've had a traditional way of thinking about how you deal with social problems, you know, mental illness, and addiction. And it's like been very the standard, what I learned in college, these are the steps that you take. And it's like, well, we don't have those resources. Like, we don't have all of these things that we need we really kind of have to pull resources from all of these other places. And so I think that's one of the things I enjoyed about you have the chance to, you can, be a teacher who can also sit next to the superintendent and talk about problems.
Yeah.
And so I found that
Yeah.
it kind of takes down those barricades between us as professionals, is like, I'm still waiting on you to call me back. I left a message, versus, oh, I'm sitting next to you and we can have a conversation.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So you can feel free to use it. It's fine. So where do you, where do you see it? So we're out, we're back in the swing of things. So we're now coming back together. We're, attending church, we're going out to eat, we're going back to work. Is participation coming back in Step Up? Is it, the last global summit, did you have 500 people there?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
We had about 250 at the GLS. So the pandemic certainly took some wind out of the sails of GLS participation. But so like a lot of organizations, I think it's kind of a rebuilding season, rebuilding time, and I from conversations that I had with people that attended this year's Global Leadership Summit, it was so affirming and encouraging for me, because people said, I look forward to coming to this every year. This is such a highlight in my year to invest in my leadership and invest in myself. And so that's encouraging for me to hear. And so we'll continue to promote it and push that. And really, it's such a great opportunity to bring the community together and create common vision and language about leadership, but also not just about leadership, but about how can we work together to address some of the challenges that we have in our community. Yeah, one of the things that I was going to say earlier about Step Up, because we it was a bit of a challenge during COVID, because we were meeting via Zoom, and that's just not the same thing. Trying to bringing people together. But one thing was happening during COVID, during that time, and that was, some of our bigger aspirations and goals for Step Up was how can we provide for us mental health and substance abuse services here in Vermilion County? I mean, there's no inpatient services available in the county. You have to go outside. And so early on, that was recognized as a huge issue. How can we do that? And through a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings, we came to realize the power of a partnership through a federal qualified healthcare foundation or facility, through an FQHC. And so we spent a lot of time investing in finding a partnership that could come to Danville to bring an FQHC that could provide those mental health and substance abuse services. And so that's happened. I mean, that's the huge thing that's on the horizon for Step Up right now. And through the Southern Illinois Healthcare Foundation, which is an FQHC, it's the second largest in the state, and they predominantly exist in the southern part of the state. They're going to be setting up services here, already have set up services here in Vermilion County. And
like medical services or like
medical
therapies?
services.
Okay.
They started with medical services at Danville High School through District 118. They have another facility they're getting ready to open up in cooperation with OSF.
Okay.
And that's the beauty of an FQHC, is that they can actually provide some services that, for example, OSF or Carl, it's difficult for them to provide those services because of the cost of those services. But because this is a federal dollars running this, they can actually provide those services in a better way. So they've been meeting with OSF and Carl and figuring out, what's the gaps here in Vermilion County. And so we're looking at, they've already purchased the old St. Elizabeth hospital grounds.
Okay.
And which, the old hospital was torn down. It's a vacant lot now. I think it's about 10 acres. And so Southern Illinois Healthcare Foundation has purchased that property, and I'd say hopefully within 3 to 5 years, we're going to see a facility built there that's going to be providing the mental health and substance abuse services that we really need in our county, in our communities. And all of that is a result of Step Up, bringing people together.
Yeah, I kind of think about it as, one of the things I was kind of reflecting on is, I was in a leadership role one time, and I was talking with, trying to motivate my staff, trying to motivate people to do, be more productive. And I just kind of went on this tangent, like movement doesn't equal being productive. Like, so if every organization is running, but they're all running in a separate direction to solve the same problem, it's like you're really just going to be spinning your wheels. And we are moving and we're trying to navigate things. But this idea of bringing people together and saying, all right, we're all going to go towards one goal.
Yes.
Now we can all pursue our other goals, but as a group, we're going to kind of run or walk in this direction so that we can get these things, set up and in play. And I would go back to your 2015, 2016, and I would say that was the time where we really started to see the substance abuse, the overdoses, suicide rates, and all of these around 2013, 2014, 2015 were like, where did this problem come from?
Right.
And I think it really kind of shifted a lot of not just nonprofits and mental health providers, because I know I always used to tell, I was like, when I first started doing family work, most of it was parenting stuff. Maybe economics, budgeting, helping people, resources. And I left and did administration work. And then when I came back, when I was writing my dissertation to just being a practitioner, I was like, drugs are everywhere. Like they were not here. I mean, they were here, but they were not so prevalent in every system I worked in. And then when I came back, it was, I remember doing a training on how to teach Head Start teachers how to administer Narcan, because there were parents that had overdosed in cars, dropping their kids off. And it's like, I'm training a preschool teacher on how to identify basically an opioid overdose and what to do. To me, it was just like, wow, that is. And when they requested, I was like, you're a preschool. And she's like, we have people that, are parents that are parents and grandparents. And I think that was the big shift too, is the substance abuse was not just being seen in younger groups. We were seeing it in older groups. We were seeing it in demographics we didn't typically see it in.
Yes.
And I think going back to where we're at currently, I know that if you follow kind of the data from the public health, we were trending in the right direction. That 2014, 2015, 2016, things were not going well.
Yes.
And then I think through a lot of different, mechanisms and collaborations and partnerships, or at least awareness, maybe even awareness, we saw these, and then COVID hit, and it's like, and that not just in Vermilion County. I mean, this is the substance abuse, the suicide rates, the mental health, the access to services. This is a problem everywhere.
It is.
And now it is somewhat, depending on when you're in these rural areas, it does become much more difficult to access services. And so I think it's, I think there is some, I don't want to say that, a proof in the pudding, but the group coming together and all of these professional entities working together and seeing changes. And I think it could have just been awareness, like saying, hey guys, there's a problem, like, and we need to really look at it.
Yeah.
And I think that's half the battle, is just getting people to acknowledge that there's something going on so that we can take steps to solve it. And so I'm hoping that this will transpire and continue to take us back to where we were with, trending in the right direction. And, it just did take the wind out. So, we were sailing along pretty nicely, and then now we're not.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Oh, absolutely.
As a sociologist, what do you feel are some of the factors that have contributed to some of these trends?
Wow, that's a deep one. So my area is primarily families. So I tend to, I think over time, with technology and at least over the last 10 years, I think I kind of relate the substance abuse issues that we had in 2015, 2016 to just problems were around, but we just kept sweeping them under the rug. Okay. And we just really didn't take time to look at what is driving this. And there was a lot of, I think, misunderstanding about, why people are in situations that they're in. And, I remember growing up as a young person in a small town, and my family was like, well, they just need to quit using drugs. And it's like, yeah, why didn't they think of that? Versus, there's family issues, there's trauma, there's, underlying mental health conditions. There's all of these different things in play. And I think that the problems were there, but we just kind of diverted our attention elsewhere. In regards to certain aspects, you could look structurally at funding, changes in credentialing, access, what services are paid for, what services are not paid for. We tend to focus more on intervention than we do prevention. So there's all these different things there, but I think just one of the problems I've been seeing over the last, few years is we're not really present with each other. We are constantly distracted. There's this breakdown in our relationships. It doesn't mean that we don't have good relationships with people we care about, but it's we are just technology. It's to me, it's technology has just became this new, and I have a whole series of
It's
rants.
kind of isolated assessment.
Yeah, we became much more isolated, less communal.
Yeah.
The things that we need to be healthy.
In some ways, you could call it a pseudo-communal, because this idea of, people spend a lot of their time on the screens, on social media, interacting with somebody else, thinking that they're connecting, but it's not really true, authentic connection.
Yes, I think the moment you had to start doing commercials to get family members to eat together was a good sign that, I had a conversation a few years ago with, I think they were an interior designer or something, I don't know. And I'm like, the way they design houses, it's like all of these islands, you don't need to come to there's a common space that you get something and go back to your island. And it's so the way we design our houses, the way that we design communication, I know people today oh my God, you're going to call me? Can't you just text me? Or I have to talk to you. And then we sometimes, we kind of isolate ourselves and we kind of stop doing the things that we know are, the more people you're around that care about you, the better off you're going to be, because they're going to be more likely to give you good advice, check in with you, hold you accountable, keep you, and I think that there's this process where it's I'll just, I read your status, you're good. But I also think we're living in different realities. I think we live in this online world where, we pretend everything is, great, and then we live in this actual reality where things aren't great. But and here you have the stigma still about, things should be great, and here I get to pretend like things are great. And to me, there somewhere along the lines we have stopped, or maybe we never did. Like I wonder sometimes, like, have we really truly accepted that mental health is just like any other type of health, and is mental illness just like any other type of mental illness? Because I think sometimes as a society we still struggle. And I had many clients I worked with. A lot of times it was like, the hardest people to tell about my problem is my family and people I care about.
Yeah.
It's like, but they love you the most. He's like, yeah, but they're also going to be the most judgmental because it's a reflection of them. And even though it's not, like, what did I do wrong as a parent because you're not doing well? Or what did I do wrong as a partner or a spouse? Or,
Yeah.
And it's, so I think there's still somewhat of this unwillingness in the micro level to have these conversations. People will go to trainings and listen to a conference of people, but if it's not at the kitchen table, if it's not in the pew, if it's not in the pulpit, and that's really one of the pushes I had in the Connection Cafe is that we have to get this conversation everywhere. Like,
Yes.
the police department, restaurants, staff. There should not be a place where people go that there is not some degree of a conversation about wellness and being healthy and mental health and breaking stigma, because it's at a point now, I think it actually moved. At one point it was a problem. I think the way they kind of break things down is like a personal problem, and then it was a social problem, and then it's an epidemic. And we're currently at an epidemic, which means if we keep doing the same thing we're doing, it's not going to offset.
No.
And it's like we have to change and restructure the entire system. And it's like we got to retrain educators. We got to retrain. Got to help parents understand, how do you talk to your kid.
Yes.
How do you empower people to share? And so there's just like all of these things that are going on kind of socially that I think cause problems. And
we started having some of those conversations at our church about mental health, being very open about it, because I think churches have not always addressed that in a very good way, especially being open about it. We had about 2013, 2014, we had a staff member who went through a very significant mental health crisis. It was it was one which we had to talk to our church about what happened and what's going on. And, we came alongside that person, that staff member, individual, provided them support, provided them with healthcare treatment that they needed. We since have had even a couple of more staff members since that time that have dealt with some mental health crisis in their life, and that first incident, and then with Celebrate Recovery, and we become much more responsive as a congregation towards that. Helpful. We let's be open about that. Let's talk about it. We had one staff member that got up and shared his own story. Shared that very private challenge and struggle he had on a Sunday morning. We had our Sunday mornings kind of dedicated to that. And we had some mental health professionals we invited to come that day. Jim Russell, actually. We asked Jim to come and be part of that day. And what it did was it was catalytic in creating a lot of conversations. People felt much more comfortable coming out and saying, I'm struggling too. How can I get help? And that was really very transformational for us as a church too.
Yeah, and I think just even having, like I said, the best actions are not even. You don't have to do these giant, large scale. It's like just talking about things.
Yeah.
And I know one of my first presentations I did, I said, if the people in charge and the adults and the leaders are not starting these conversations, like that's a problem. But more importantly, the judgment that comes with saying, if someone stood up in the congregation and said, hey, I was struggling with, hey, I'm sick, we got some bad news at the doctor, the prognosis isn't good. No one would tell them that they didn't have the disease. They'd be like, well, are you sure? You're not mistaken. And I think there is this part of mental illness where we try to figure out, is there anything other than that?
Yeah.
Versus, okay, you're not in a good place emotionally.
Yeah.
And you can link this, go all the way back to like even early childhood, where we tend to teach kids that there are good feelings and there are bad feelings. And so as they age, it's, I shouldn't feel this way because this is bad. No, this is how you feel. The question is, what do we do about what you're feeling and what you're thinking and how you're behaving? And we just kind of like throw the conversation on once. What was the reference? It was like, we tend to we don't really want to talk about the train until it's derailed. like it's like, the train crashed. What should we have done?
Yeah.
And it's, what's going on with the tracks?
Yeah.
And I think having those, going back to these genuine conversations, not checkbox conversations.
Yeah.
We got to talk about mental. And I prefer to, why are we talking about mental illness? Why don't we talk about what it is to be healthy?
Yeah.
And I think that
right.
is a nice shift, is that being healthy doesn't mean you're not ill. I mean, being healthy with mental illness can be talking about, working through. I mean, and there's all these different things that we've just shifted or not shifted back to how we talk about things. I think in one of my presentations, I was like, have you ever noticed if someone's like, oh, I'm sick? You're like, oh, you check in, what's going on? But in the office, like, oh, I'm depressed. Like, oh, we need to go to the office, shut the door, be quiet when we talk about it because we don't want anyone to know. And it's like, why are you whispering about that, but you have no problem talking about that? And until we can accept that these things are illnesses, that, there is not always a choice. Some of these things are randomly, and I think that's where we struggle as a society, is if it can happen to you, it can happen to me.
Yes.
And if it can happen to your kid, it can happen to my kid.
Yeah. And
so by just minimizing it, we somehow protect ourselves cognitively of what the reality actually is.
I like what you said, that, we need to have as much conversation about what does it really mean to be healthy as it is, what's it like to be unhealthy? Because I think a lot of people who deal with mental health accept it as normal. This is just the way I am, and this is my lot in life. Or then, of course, you've got the stigma that goes along with even bringing it up and talking about the fear of what people might think. In my own life, I had my father dealt with years and years of mental health issue. That all stems back from his childhood, a traumatic event that happened when he was a child. And it just followed him through life. World War II, is a veteran in the war, and being a family man through life, and it wasn't until one particular day, it was July 4th, 1988, something clicked, and his world unraveled, because he had kept it internalized all of the years, and didn't feel like he could talk about it. And we need to talk about it. We need to feel like it's okay to have these kinds of conversations about our mental health.
Yeah, and I think, not only is it okay, but I go back to that. We'll just say, all right, this is a safe place to share. That is one way of, but I always come back to, if you are not asking specific questions, versus how are you doing today, hoping that the person is doing fine so you can go on to do what you need to do. We don't do specific check-ins in regards to, we know, and like I said, if you spend any time around anyone, you know when there is a shift, when something is going on. I mean, we are not, we are pretty transparent. I mean, we like to think that we hide things pretty well. But my ability to hide how I'm feeling is really contingent upon your ability not to see what you're seeing. Because like, you know, if I'm happy go lucky today and the next day I'm, you know, hey, you know, or disengaged or isolating myself or removed, and you're, how are you doing? Versus how are you feeling? What are you thinking? Where are you at?
Yeah.
Like, I see something different. I don't know what it is, but I'm seeing something different. Versus, how are you doing? I mean, that's what you do in the gas station. How are you doing? And we all pray that they say fine. I mean, we've all had the attendant that's like, well, you're like, I'm here for 9 more hours. But the idea of being deliberate, I think that's one of the things that I think is like, are you being deliberate in your actions and your conversations with people? And I'm not saying you have to do a therapy session.
Yeah.
But I think you need to be deliberate and intent and focused and there for at least a few minutes to figure out where people are at, what is going, especially now. I mean, pre-COVID, it was 1 in 4 people were dealing with some type of mental health issue. And I think it's in like the 70th percentile that someone has dealt with something over the last 3 years. And it's not an etch and sketch like, oh, COVID's over, I'm just going to not have anxiety or depression or any of these things again. It's like we're going to have to step up our game, not to do the pun there, but but we're going to have to step up our game and how we talk about it and how we're deliberately talking about it and putting time in our. We fill up our days with conversations that are somewhat not important at all. And then we squeeze in the important conversations right at the end.
Yeah.
And it's like, you should really be squeezing in baseball facts at the end.
That's
like,
right. That's right.
Like, you know, we do this with Eleanor. You know, she's 7. It's like, you know, when she pick her up, it's like, what was your high? What was your low? What went well? What didn't go well? How are you feeling? You know, I mean, start the conversation, and then we can talk about what's the snack.
Right.
But the focus needs to be on how are you doing? Because school's been very rough for her. The first 2 years of her school was during COVID, which was lots and lots of upset. So I think just having, you know, these processes at all levels, that, you know, from the bottom of the organization to the top. There used to be a book in leadership called Hardwiring for Excellence, that the person who cleans the building should be just as much involved in the mission as the person that runs the company.
Yes.
And if those people are not sharing a mission, sharing values, and sharing behaviors, the organization will not succeed.
Yes.
And so I find that is the same thing with mental health, is that if from the bottom to the top, we are not having this conversation and sometimes forcing the conversation. Like I've had some friends that are in sobriety and it's like they have a meeting, they'll come together and they're like, you know, okay, we're going to do a check-in. Everyone's going to go around and we're going to talk about where we're at mentally and emotionally. And then we'll get to the budget.
That's good.
And, you know, it's like, it wasn't on the agenda, but this individual is making it part of the process. Yes, we're still going to do our work. Mm-hmm. And if you're a good leader trying to lead people, if they're not in the right mind, emotionally, or body physically, they're not going to be productive. Mm-hmm. And so it really does benefit you to spend 5 minutes now so you don't have to spend 12 days later.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, we are coming to an end, so I definitely appreciate having you out here, coming to be in the podcast. I definitely look forward to making coffee for you guys next August, right?
All right.
Is it next August? Okay.
Yes.
Anything that you would like to let the audience know, anything coming up that we should know about, any events, any...
Well, you know, holidays seem to always be a difficult time for families, and Christmas time is a big time for us as a church. You know, we provide a Christmas Eve services,
Okay.
4 o'clock and 6 o'clock. on December the 24th. We have two venues, so we'll actually have two services in each of those venues at 4 and 6 o'clock for the whole family. Very Christmas oriented. I think kind of brings the family together and kind of gets focused on the Christmas message. And so that's something that we really focus a lot of time and attention on, and would welcome. And it's open to anybody. Anybody could come and join us, be a part of that.
Now, the Step Up meetings, those are every month.
No, weekly, every Tuesday night, 6 o'clock.
No, that's Celebrate Recovery. Sorry, Step Up. This the organization.
Step Up. Okay, I'm sorry. Did you?
I probably missed that. So let's do first. So Celebrate Recovery is every Tuesday.
It is. Celebrate Recovery every Tuesday, 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Step Up meets, the professionals and the organizations meet.
Correct. On Fridays, every 2 months. So next one will be January. And I apologize, I don't have the date on that. We just set the calendar for all the dates for 2023.
Okay.
But it's the third Friday of the month.
Okay.
Typically, you can set your calendar by that. We have a couple of exceptions, but every other month.
Excellent.
Yeah. And it meets at 8 o'clock on Friday, the third Friday of the
Before everyone goes in the office, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
Yeah. Excellent. So for you guys tuning in again, I just wanted to kind of plug my next event, Community Connection Cafe, January 23rd. We will be doing a presentation, coffee social, helping yourself or others with mental health, a pathway to growth, acceptance and growth, pathway to acceptance and growth. Love to see you guys out there. If you can't come physically, register, and we will be sending out a Zoom link so that you can attend remotely. And once again, Dale, thank you for attending.
Dr. Wade, thanks for having us.
You're welcome.
Please,
Yes,
I
we will come
appreciate
back out. So,
All right.
and that is the end of our show.